Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Marin Coalition. I'm Scott Pinsky, the chair of the Marin Coalition, and I welcome you to our presentation, The Future of Smart. Before we begin, let me just tell you a little bit about our organization for those who are unfamiliar. Marin Coalition is a nonprofit, all-volunteer, 501c3 public affairs forum based here in Marin County. We have speakers from various perspectives that come to our podium and offer conversations that truly matter. Through the end of the season, which runs until June of this year, we will be presenting all of our programs on Zoom, as we have been for the last 18 months or so, all at no cost to the public. We thank all our members and donors who make these programs possible and allow us to continue to present these events that we believe help us all become better citizens of Marin and the greater Bay Area. Let's begin with some housekeeping issues. These are the same as you've probably seen before. This event will be recorded, and if you care to watch it at a later time, it will be available on our archives at marincoalition.org. Closed captioning is available if you click on the live transcript at the bottom of your screen. And for questions and answers, instead of being on camera, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. We will see your questions and ask them of our presenter after his remarks. And if you'd like to become a member or join the Marin Coalition, you can do so at our website. Let's talk about the next events, and then we'll get started with today's program. We have coming up on April 12 at noon, Where the Money Goes, a breakdown of Measure A. This will be presenting speakers that will talk about the renewal of the Marin Parks and Open Space sales tax and where the financing is directed. Those speakers will be Max Corton, Marin County Parks Director, David Lewis, the Director of the UC Cooperative Extension, and Ruben Martin, the Chief of Central Marin Fire. And then in May 3rd at noon, as previously noted, we will have our primary preview. This will be a preview of the elections and candidates and measures that are scheduled for the June primary. And our speakers will be our favorite political superstars, Dick Spotswood and Greg Brockbank, something you won't want to miss. All right, on to today's program. Thank you for hanging in there with me on that. We're extremely pleased today to welcome today's featured speaker here for the first time, the General Manager of the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit District, Mr. Eddy Cumins. As General Manager, he is responsible for overseeing day-to-day operations of SMART's transit and freight services. Eddy's also responsible for the planning, development, and construction of SMART's multi-use pathway network and rail extensions. Prior to joining SMART, as General Manager in November of 2021, Eddy served as Chief Operating Officer for the Utah Transit Authority. He earned his master's degree in organizational leadership from the Colorado State University, and he holds a Bachelor of Science degree in human resource development from Southwestern College. And you'll hear more from him about his background shortly. It's my pleasure to welcome Eddy.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate that introduction. I will just quickly bring up a presentation. Again, thank you very much, Scott. I appreciate that. Just a little bit more about me. Prior to my transit career, I actually served 20 years in the Air Force. I retired in 2011 and then began my career at the Utah Transit Authority. Originally, I was hired to be the maintenance manager. That was my background in the Air Force. I did that for a couple of years and then moved in to be a regional general manager and then eventually the chief operating officer. And I served 3 years in that role prior to joining SMART. Very, very happy to be here. I absolutely love this community. This is an area that my wife and I had vacationed to several times over the years. So as you can imagine, when you get that phone call from the recruiter that asks if you're interested in moving to wine country, obviously you take them up on that opportunity. So very happy to be here. Today's presentation, I wanted to just provide a brief update on ridership. I think it's important to understand where we are today. And then I wanted to spend most of our time talking about the work that we've been doing with the board of planning for the future. And then at the end, I'd be happy to take some questions. All right, so this slide shows our ridership, and what it does is it compares FY20, FY21, and FY22. FY20 is the green, FY21 is the orange, and FY22 is the blue. And really what this does is it compares pre-COVID to current ridership, as well as really that low period that we had. And as you can see, we're doing much better in FY22 than we did in FY21, but we're still well below where we were pre-COVID in FY20. In February, we carried 26,529 riders. We had our highest average weekday ridership in February, which was really good. And so we're starting to see that trend of our ridership coming back. And, just based on the numbers that I saw for yesterday's ridership, I'm happy to report we had our highest ridership day yesterday since COVID began in March of 2020. So it was really, really good to see that. Overall, yesterday we carried 1,479 riders. So very good to see that ridership coming back. And I think a lot of that has to do with the high gas prices. So I think we're going to continue to see that trend continue in the future. This is just another way of looking at the data. Again, this shows FY20, FY21, and FY22. Yeah, the green line is FY20, and you can really see there in March where it starts to really drop off quickly. And then as you see in the orange of FY21, it was really very low ridership. And then you can see the blue line. We've kind of been rolling along at that 11 to 1,200 riders. There was a dip in January. We think that was due to the Omicron variant. Saw a dip, but as I mentioned, we're starting to see our ridership come back. February was good, and what I'm seeing in March, I think March will likely be the best month we've had since COVID began. So good news. Another way of looking at the ridership data, again, this is comparing pre-COVID to our ridership. You can see the orange trend line above, and what that shows is that if you look back around that September, October timeframe, we were about 43 to 45% of pre-COVID ridership. And then you see that drop off to 34% in January. Again, that was just due to the Omicron variant. And then you see we kind of bump back up to 39% in February. And as I mentioned before, that trend's going to continue. Overall, year to date, as we look out, we're about 40% of pre-COVID ridership. So we still have a long, long way to go to get back to where we want to be. You can see, right, January, February, that was right before COVID hit. And that was when SMART was actually hitting its peak ridership period since service began. So still a long way to go. This is interesting. This is something that's a relatively new way of looking at information from SMART. In the transit business, you have different number of days in a month, sometimes there's more weekdays, sometimes there's more Saturdays in a month. And so you see monthly ridership trends kind of go up and down. And a lot of times it's hard to tell if you're actually making progress or not. And so I asked staff to put together this slide that shows the rolling 12-month average. It really shows whether or not we're continuing to make progress. And you can tell that we are from this slide, continuing to grow as we come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. So a trend we absolutely hope to see continue. So now I want to shift gears a little bit, and this is where I wanted to spend the vast majority of my time, is talking about planning for the future. A lot of work has been going on behind the scenes, as well as a lot of work going on with the board. And I think we're really getting close on a couple of our items, and I'm really excited to move forward in the future. This is the planning model that we decided to use. As we all know, there are many different strategic planning models out there. This is one that I was familiar with, that I'd used in the past. And this model starts with a SWOT analysis, which helps an agency identify its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Then it goes into establishing a mission and vision, establishing the agency's strategic objectives and setting goals, developing a strategy, deploying that strategy, monitoring performance, and all of this is related back to achieving results. And so Where we started in this, again, back with the SWOT analysis, is we decided to do this internally with staff, which is always really a difficult thing to do. As I've talked about this in the public lately, really have to commend staff, because anybody that's been a part of this exercise, it's really difficult to take that long, hard look at the mirror and really identify and be honest with yourself about what your weaknesses are and what your opportunities are to improve. So I want to show that now, because I want to spend some time on it, because I think this is really the highlight of the presentation. First, I will start with strengths. Dedicated, highly skilled staff. I think that a lot of people just don't realize how great of a staff works here at SMART. Being the new person coming into the organization, this is something that I was really excited to see, is that there's really dedicated, highly skilled people in these positions that really care about making sure that SMART's as good as it can possibly be. We have a safe and reliable service, modern, comfortable trains. I came from the Utah Transit Authority. I think that the front runner there is a great service, but riding our trains is quiet and as smooth as the ride is. I would definitely take the SMART train over the front runner in Utah. It's an awesome train. We have strong bi-directional commute patterns, and what that means is that we don't just have people traveling, to the south or to the north, but we actually have people going both directions, which is a good thing. Our infrastructure, we're obviously a new system, so our infrastructure is in excellent condition, and we have bike-train synergy. In my past, we had a lot of bicyclists that would use the train, but nothing like what we have here. Every day I get a ridership report. It tells me what yesterday's ridership was, and it also tells me the number of bikes that were on the train. And I'm generally seeing numbers of somewhere between 15 and 20% of people who ride the train have a bike with them. That's an incredible number, so something that we're very proud of. We've been successful at identifying and securing funds over the years. I've heard Chair Rabbit say it a number of times, but we punch above our weight when it comes to securing outside funds. So that's been good for us. And really, we have a strong organizational culture. Again, that goes back to the people that we have working in the organization and how much they care about SMART's mission. So that's really good to see. Weaknesses, this was the part that we probably as a staff spent more time on than anything. But the first weakness that I think you have to identify is the first and last mile connections. I truly believe that this is SMART's Achilles heel. I think the train does a phenomenal job of getting people from point A to point B, but if people actually want to go to point C, that's a problem. And everything that I know about transit, and I'm not talking about the marathon runners, the avid bicyclist, the average person who rides transit generally will not walk more than a quarter of a mile. And so if you think about that, if you do not have good bus connections, or if you don't have a good method of getting people to their final destination, that makes it less than desirable. So this is something that I really feel as an agency we have to focus on, we have to get better at, and this is absolutely at the top of my priority list to solve this problem. Single track system. For those of you that don't know, we're mostly a single track system, which means we only have a limited number of spaces for the north and southbound trains to pass each other. That creates a challenge that there is a issue with one train. These issues tend to cascade throughout the system and can delay multiple trains, maybe all of the trains over time. And so that's a real challenge for us. The other issue is actually keeping a consistent headway. Right now, SMART runs an hour and 4-minute headways. Okay, can you see my screen okay?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Again, I apologize. So I believe before I got cut off, I just moved to weaknesses. I was talking about first and last mile connections. I do truly believe that is the agency's Achilles heel, something that I'm highly focused on, because and again, I don't know, I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but I think the train does a great job of getting from point A to point B. But when people actually want to go to point C, that's where we have challenges. And so I really want to focus on closing that gap. And that's going to be me building relationships with the local bus and other transit providers to be able to close that gap. Single track system, anytime that we have an issue on the train, we have problems that can actually cascade throughout the system. So there's only a limited number of places for our trains to be able to pass one another. So if we have that issue, it tends to affect all the other trains that are in the system at the time. The other issue that we have is actually keeping consistent headways. Right now we run hour and 4-minute headways. That's a real challenge because when you compare it to local bus, typically they'll run 15, 30, or 60-minute service. And so when you're trying to make these connections, then you obviously you need to be on a consistent headway where you're actually at a given spot at a given station, either on the hour or on the half hour. So that is something that we will be working on and looking at. Where do we need the strategic double tracking in order to maintain those consistent headways? So that's work we need to do. Early and late night service, this is something I hear quite a bit about. I probably hear more about late night service than I do early morning, but I am hearing about early as well. But the feedback that I get is, a lot of times people want to be able to take a train and go out to dinner or something like that and be able to get home late at night or maybe even an event. And so that's something I've asked staff to take a look at to see, is there a real market there, and is that something that we should be providing? Limited number of destination stations. And what I mean by that, it kind of goes back to the first and last mile piece, because what I mean by limited number of destination stations is that we don't have a lot of stations where there's just everything, where you can get off the train and you have everything right there where you need it. As I've been looking at the system, our top 3 stations are Petaluma, San Rafael, and Santa Rosa downtown. So when you look at those and you think about what's different about those stations, there's more things around those stations. And so again, just goes back to the first and last mile connection piece that we need to do a better job at. Public perception, local support, I think that's something that we all know, and probably everybody listening in knows that that's an issue and something that we need to work on and we need to improve upon. I've probably learned as much or more from my private life as I have my public life. As I've been out meeting people, people ask, they find out that I'm new. First question is, what brought you here? Why did you leave? Why'd you leave Utah? And then they find out that I'm the general manager of SMART. And I can tell you that I have not met one person yet in my private life that has not had an opinion about SMART. And to be honest, it hasn't always been a positive opinion. And so I realize that there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. And it's a weakness for us. Minimal staffing levels with long hiring timeline. We're a relatively small staff. Anytime somebody leaves, it's tough to fill those shoes because everybody wears 2 or 3 hats. They have different jobs, different things that they focus on. And so that's an internal item of just something that we think we need to take a look at with our hiring practices. And can we streamline that process and be able to get people on board quicker? Parking capacity and paid parking. This is something that's really interested me as I've been here. Just last week, I was at 2 different stations. I was at San Marin Station, and then on Friday, I was at Petaluma Station. And it was very interesting to me that I was the only paid car in the parking lot. There were people parked out on the road that, were riding the train, but I was the only car in the parking lot. If you go to Roanoke Park Station, there's 1 or 2 cars in the parking lot. However, if you drive to Cotati where it's free, that parking lot is full. And so this is something that I'm asking staff to take a look at. Is paid parking actually a deterrent, or is it keeping people from riding the train? So I think it's something that we need to look at. And last but not least in this category, everything is a priority. That's something that I identified coming in, being new. It just seemed like everybody was going in a million different directions, which really highlighted the need for the strategic planning process to really identify what's important, what we need to be focusing our limited amount of time on, and what's the most important things to the agency. And that leads us into our opportunities, where there really is an opportunity to improve our strategic direction and alignment with staff and the board. I think that there's untapped markets out there that we really need to be taking a look at. Tourism, students, late night, recreation and events, those are all items that are all areas that I really want to focus on. Students is a big one for me. I came from Utah. A large portion of our ridership was college and private school students. And so we do have a lot of students that are riding today, but I think we can really tap that market and get more students on our trains. I think I'll just stick on that one a little bit more. Tourism is another one. I really want to find a way to connect to the Sonoma County Airport, be able to get people to the train, but also find those solutions for wherever people are going, that we're able to make those connections and actually have that opportunity that the train becomes part of the wine country experience, and you don't necessarily have to have a car when you come here. Improve wayfinding, real-time information, apps, and our online presence. That's really just about communicating with the public. I think that when you get to a station, you hop off the train, you ought to be able to see a map, you know everything that's around you. You ought to know what the destinations are, where you connect to a bus or some other type of transit, all of those things. And so I think there's a real opportunity for wayfinding. Same thing on our pathways. You ought to be able to look at a map, know where you are, and understand how you get to where you're going. Improve our first and last mile connections. I've talked about that a lot, so I won't speak on that too much, but that is a real opportunity for us and has to be one of our top priorities. Increase interaction with the public and community leaders. Doing things like this, I think, are what we need to be doing. I've been spending a lot of my time meeting with groups, meeting with folks. I've even met with those people that would be viewed as opponents to SMART. I've sat down and had conversations with them. And I think that that's the right thing to do. I think it's about hearing from the community and making sure that we're hearing and we're listening to that feedback and we're making adjustments. And again, it's all focused on making sure that the SMART train meets the needs of the community. We want to enhance our marketing efforts to target our key markets. Again, that goes back to those untapped markets of tourism, students, late night recreation and event service. And we want to look at reactivating some of the onboard amenities as people are starting to come back to transit and come back to the train. You know, I've heard about we need to get Wi-Fi back up and running. Do we need to open the snack bar again? Those are things that we need to look at as folks are starting to come back. And then threats, future sales tax funding, it's always the elephant in the room. Everybody knows that smart sales tax expires in 2029. And so that's something that we need to be aware of, and we need to be doing the work that we need to do to make sure that we get that extended ultimately. It's also a threat of knowing, and we just have to be aware that we have well-organized and funded opponents that are out there. Another thing that most people don't understand, I get a lot of questions about, expansions. And one thing that I point out to folks is that the extensions north of Windsor and east of Nevada are not in the Planned Bay Area 2050 plan. And what that means is that it really limits our ability to compete for grants and funds. It makes it extremely difficult to compete for state funds, and it makes it virtually impossible to compete for federal funds without being in the regional transportation plan. So as we continue to move forward, that's something that we need to work on, helping everybody understand those projects and be able to get them into the Planned Bay Area 2050 plan. Ongoing litigation, slowing our projects. There's litigation on the pathways, that are slowing down our construction, and those are things that we need to be aware of and figure out a way to manage through that process. Public trust and confidence, again, that comes back to the public perception and local support. It's a real threat. It's something that, again, we know that not everybody's a huge supporter of SMART, and we need to do whatever it is that it takes to regain that support and build public trust. Cyber attacks, that's kind of an internal item, but something we always need to be aware of. And rising capital and operating costs, we all know that nothing's getting any cheaper. So it's just something that we need to be aware of as we continue to look at expansion and completing the pathway, that essentially nothing's getting cheaper. So this is ultimately where we're headed. This is what I like to refer to as the alignment pyramid. Starts with a vision, which is essentially SMART's aspiration, the mission, really identifying why the organization exists, identifying our strategic objectives or our major priorities, really setting our goals that are focused on the results that SMART aims to achieve, and then developing our strategy or that plan to achieve those objectives. As we work through this process and I talked to the board about establishing some strategic objectives, I really encourage the board to only do 3 to 5, to really make sure that the items that we focused on were really these large buckets, big items. And, anytime that you have, 15 to 20 objectives that you're back to, nothing's a priority. And so I also recommended, and you have this influence, right? So anytime that we think about our strategic objectives, you have all these outside influences that you have to think about. And I think we all know that we could probably put a million different words in this green influence area, but just a few of those were customer and public expectations, equity, the environment, quality, financial responsibility, and of course, safety are all the other things that you have to think about as you establish your strategic objectives. Talking to the board, I mentioned that I think that this is probably one of the most difficult parts of this process, but as I've been out talking to people, I tend to get the same questions over and over and over again. And I suggested to the board that perhaps SMART strategic objectives lied somewhere in these questions. And those questions are, what is SMART's plan to increase ridership? What is the status of the pathway? What is the holdup with the Windsor extension? How long until we get to Healdsburg and Cloverdale? Is SMART planning to go east? Why is SMART taking on freight? When will SMART add back additional weekday trips and Sunday service? Is SMART planning to electrify the train? Does SMART have a plan to improve wayfinding at stations and on the pathway? And what are the long-term effects of the pandemic on ridership? These are the questions, regardless if I'm talking about my public or my private life, these are the questions that I get, and I think that this is what is important to the public. And so with this, I suggested to the board that our strategic objectives are likely ridership, pathways, extensions, and freight. And there was a lot of discussion around this topic, but as we talked about it, the board agreed that this is probably our 4 major items and the things that we need to focus on. So what are the next steps? The next steps, right now, the board is working on developing our vision and our mission statements and finalizing the strategic objectives. As I said, I think that those strategic objectives are going to stay, and we are very, very, very close on the vision and mission, and I hope to have that completed and finalized at the next board meeting next Wednesday. And then for staff, we want to solicit public feedback. So once the board is completed with the vision and mission statements, we've finalized those strategic objectives. What I want to do is solicit feedback from the public, and I want to have these listening sessions focused exclusively on each strategic objective. So the first one will likely be on ridership. So the focus of that conversation will be solely around ridership. And then in later listening sessions, we'll talk about pathways, extensions, and freight. But I really hope for all of those that are out there listening, I hope to hear from you during these listening sessions, and I hope that you'll help spread the word. Although we love hearing from those folks that attend our board meetings regularly, I do want to hear from everybody else. I want to hear from those who ride, and more importantly, I want to hear from those who don't currently ride, and I want to understand why and why the system doesn't meet their needs and what we need to do to improve upon that. The next step will be to develop goals and align with the strategic objectives. We will develop and deploy our strategies. And what I want is a overarching strategy, but I also want a detailed strategy for each one of those strategic objectives. So again, using ridership as the example, a very detailed strategy of all the things that we're going to do over the next couple of years to improve ridership. And again, we'll have one of those for each one of those strategic objectives. And then we want to monitor performance. I think in strategic planning, I think the fun part is doing the SWOT analysis, putting together the plan, making something that is, looks really good and excites everybody. But if you don't actually have key performance indicators and know what your measurements are and be able to track your progress, I would suggest that you're doing it wrong. And so I want to make sure that we identify what our baseline is, and then we're tracking our progress and making sure that we're continuing to achieve the goals that we're setting. And ultimately, I want to make sure that we achieve our desired results. And so this is a very exciting process. This has been well received. I've received a lot of good feedback from the community, which is great. But really, for me, it's about making sure that we're on the right path and we're doing the right things, and we're focused on continuous improvement, and we're continuing to make the train better each and every day and make sure that it's meeting the needs of the community. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that may be out there.
All right, I am back. Eddy, thank you for a very thorough and detailed and thought-provoking presentation. I think you anticipated a lot of the questions already that folks have, but we do have some coming in, and anyone who wants to ask further questions, please go ahead and use that Q&A button, and we'll read your question and get it into our speaker. We have a question from Dwayne Bellinger, who asks, do you have figures on park and ride?
On the parking ride, so at our parking, I assume that he's talking about our stations at.
I'm not 100% positive, but that originally the whole thing.
What's interesting is I don't have numbers of people that park there. I haven't looked at that data yet. What I have looked at is the revenue that comes in from there. And to be honest with you, I think it's minimal. I think that's why I want to study this and understand if it's a barrier to ridership. People are choosing not to ride because of the $2.35 parking fee for the day. Then that's something we really need to take a look at. And so a lot of these things, they're identified. We've identified that the potential weaknesses. Now the next step is digging into each one of those items and figuring out what's the right strategy to overcome it. And so it's minimal. My personal experience, as I mentioned in the presentation, if I wasn't cut off at that time, which I really want to apologize for, but being at San Marin Station and being the only car in the parking lot, that's eye-opening. Being at Petaluma Station, our highest ridership station, and being the only car in the parking lot, that's eye-opening. It's definitely something we need to take a look at.
Yeah, and I suspect that may be what Dwayne's asking about, is those observations. Mm-hmm. Interesting. You go to Berkeley and you go to a BART station, and obviously the parking lot's overflowing. Mm-hmm. Let me ask about something historical, and this predates your tenure, obviously, but when SMART was being proposed, my recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong if you have information on this, was that there was an initial initiative on the ballot for a 0.5% sales tax, which failed, and then there was a second initiative for a 1/4 sales tax, which succeeded, and that is the funding for SMART, which led some to question how SMART can be funded with essentially half of the projected amount that was needed. Because if you needed a 0.5 sales tax that you didn't get, you only got a 1/4, you're looking at half of the revenue or income source for the program. So unless I'm misremembering this, there was that issue at the outset that we're starting a new program. They only have half the funding that they thought they needed. How are they going to succeed?
Yeah, so I can say we are funded with a 1/4 sales tax. I have heard the stories about the 0.5 I don't know if it actually went and, actually went on the ballot, or if it was something they looked at and polled and decided it didn't stand a chance and then bumped it down to a 1/4, right? But there are challenges there. I think that as we go through and we put together the plan and we say what is optimal, then I think you have to overlay the budget and you have to be real with what your capabilities are and what you can do. And, you have a limited amount of dollars. We also get funding from the state. That helps. There's 5307 funds that come from the feds, preventative maintenance funds. And so there's other funds besides just the 1/4 that come in. and then you have your fare box revenue, things of that nature that come in to help offset some of these things. But it is true, it's a quarter cent is not a substantial amount of money when you're running a transit agency, especially commuter rail. But those are things that we're going to have to work through as we go.
What are your thoughts about the future of the funding? I don't know when that quarter cent tax expires, but my recollection is that it's for a set period of time. Any thoughts or insight into where things go at the end of that period? I mean, presumably there'll be another initiative to either extend it or increase it or reduce it or something, but
Right.
I'm just not up on that.
So it is set to expire in 2029. I get asked almost daily, when is SMART going to go back back to the ballot? And honestly, I tell people the environment has to be right. In 2020, they went to the ballot, it failed. I don't know that a lot has changed today, to be honest with you. And so I think a lot of things that we're identifying in our SWOT analysis is work that needs to be done. And I think that there's a lot of work to do. And so I haven't been out saying, oh, we're going in 24 or 26 or 28 or any of those things, because I do feel like there's a lot of work to do. And I think that the staff here believes that there's a lot of work to do. And so we want to focus on that work. That's what's driving the strategic plan of really identifying those things that need to be different. And I believe in this system. I get asked a lot, right? I had a great job in Utah. People ask me the question, why did you come here? I've even had people in my private life say, aren't you worried about job security? Why did you take this job? What are you thinking? And I tell people, I had a great job in Utah, but if I didn't think I could make a difference here, I wouldn't have came. If I didn't believe in what SMART does and what it can do and how it can be a solution in this community, I wouldn't have came here. And I can't say it any more clear than that. SMART really does have the opportunity to solve a lot of problems in this area, and I want to be a part of that. And I want to do this work. I want to grow the ridership, not even well beyond what we had pre-pandemic. That's not, we were carrying 2,800 to 3,000 people a day. I think everybody's excited to get back to that number. I will tell you, my personal goals are well beyond that. And I want this train to be as successful as it can possibly be.
When they ask, you could just say, I came for the Chardonnay, and they'll shut up. Alan Shavitz has a question. To what extent do you think that ridership will increase due to the Ukraine war and rise in gas prices? And if it does increase, how much of that increase do you think is sustainable?
I think it's going to be interesting. Yesterday was our highest ridership day since COVID began. That is great news, right? I will be honest, I was driving to work this morning and I was listening to the radio and I was thinking about, $6 a gallon gas. Again, how is SMART a solution in the community? And I would like to take to the board next week a resolution that extends our 40% discount on fares until the end of August. It's set to expire in May. And I think I'd also like to recommend that we suspend parking fees in our park and ride lots and really be that alternative to driving, right? Be that alternative to driving. You don't have to pay the $6 a gallon for fuel. Come and ride the SMART train. Let us get you to where you're going. We obviously have capacity right now. I think that would be well received in the community and something that, again, I see it as an opportunity for us to be a solution and help out. So I think the board will be receptive of that, but that is on my mind, and I have staff working on that right now to take that proposal to our board next Wednesday.
Interesting. We'll see how that goes.
But to answer your question directly,
sure.
I think it has huge potential. Fuel prices drive people's behavior. And so I think there's a real chance that we're going to see our numbers skyrocket quickly. Another thing that will be interesting is the mask mandate on transit and airplanes is set to expire on March 18th. I think that's up to this point. Every time we get within, 4 to 6 weeks, we get an email extending that. This time we haven't received it. So there's a good chance that the mask mandate's going to expire. How will people take that? That's yet to be seen. I think there's some people that are, don't want to sit on a train and have to wear a mask for their 30-minute or 45-minute commute. And there's other people that feel much safer with that. So obviously, you could still wear a mask if you wanted to on the train, but they may or may not feel comfortable. So I think we're going to have to manage through that and see how the public reacts to that news.
More questions coming in. We have a question from Kingston Cole. Your discussion did not discuss post-pandemic / work from home. People are not going back to metro areas, whether it's San Francisco, he notes that BART is at 40% capacity, or New York. How is SMART going to deal with this permanent loss of ridership? He's assuming it's permanent. And what are the positives and negatives that you've heard about SMART? Where do you see public support now that we're a few years into the program?
So I'll take the first question first. The data that I've been looking at points towards maybe a 3 days a week work week. Potentially people working from the office, maybe Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday working from home, or Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday working from home on Mondays and Fridays. I think that's something we need to be well aware of. That's one of the reasons that I identified in the SWOT analysis that we really need to be focused on tourism, students, events, late night dinner service, things of that nature. I think we got to be willing to be agile enough to adapt to the different situation. It's going to be unique because in the past, we always had a set schedule. Everybody in transit basically did the same thing, where you have a set schedule that's set Monday through Friday. People tend to ride at the same time. And I think that's going to be much different. So we've got to be agile, and we've got to work our way through this and understand what's going to happen. I don't think that right now we know what post-COVID is going to look like. And I think we're just going to have to pay attention and be able to adapt as the situation changes. But we could see a thing where maybe schedules are different, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday versus Monday and Friday. My gut tells me that it won't be that easy. To be honest with you, I think there will be some people work Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Others will work Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So it's not going to be easy. It's something that we're going to have to pay attention to. But I think this points to maybe we need to be looking beyond just a traditional commuter and looking at other markets that maybe haven't ridden the train in the past.
And what about his question about public support in general? I know it's kind of a vague question to address, but and your tenure has been a small fraction of the time that the program's been in existence, but do you see a trend one way or another in terms of public acceptance or support for the program?
I can say this, I personally feel well received in the community. I have to say that as I've been out talking about this, this vision and this planning and what I want to see and what I think needs to improve, I think that's been well received. I think it excites people. I think that most people agree that these things need to change and need to be better. So personally, I feel well received. I think that I've heard from staff that we're getting a lot more phone calls of people wanting to partner with us and work with us than we have in the past. And so that's a really good sign. Do I think that everybody's just in love with SMART and we're ready to go and get 2/3 vote? No, I don't. I think there's still a lot of work to do. And like I said, everybody I meet has an opinion. And what's been very interesting to me, and I show these free passes because after being here probably a month, I went to my folks and I said, I need a package of free passes, and I'm going to carry them around in my pocket. And here's why. As I meet people, as I said, everybody seems to have an opinion about SMART. But what's interesting to me is when I follow up their opinion with, have you ever ridden it? 95% of the time, the answer is no. So then my question is, how do you hate something you've never ridden? You've never tried. And so I carry around free passes. If I meet you and you tell me you hate the train and you've never ridden it, you earn yourself a free pass. And so I truly believe, I know that we need to fix our first and last mile. I know that that needs to be better to appeal to a wider range of riders. I know that, and I'm going to work on that, and I hope to fix that issue. However, the train is a beautiful ride. It is smooth, it is quiet, it is relaxing. And I will tell you, I don't know of a more beautiful area than that area on the train tracks between Petaluma and Novato. When I ride, that's my favorite area. That's when I shut up, quit talking to people, and just look out the window, because I think that area is just incredible to go through there. And so I'm encouraging people to get out, try the system, ride it, try it. And I think that will change public opinion as they have an opportunity to experience it.
Let me ask this at the risk of going into a hornet's nest. How many of those haters that you encounter are people who are stuck behind a red train traffic block in downtown San Rafael?
That is a hornet's nest. I haven't ran into a lot of those people personally that they told me that was their reason. Not that they're not out there, not that I haven't talked to those individuals, but I wouldn't say that was a high number of people that I've personally talked to. But there are challenges there. Can we make that better? Can we improve that? Those are all things that we need to look at, without a doubt.
Okay, we're getting more questions. Let me buzz through them. Leonard Hoffman asks, my experience in other cities has been unsafe conditions for riders. I realize we cannot expect guards aboard, but how can this be managed? I think he's talking about personal safety inside the train.
Yeah, so we do not have our own police force, but we do have code enforcement officers. If there's an issue, the engineers and conductors do have radio contact that they could call for support if there was something there. We also partner closely with local police, so if there were an issue on the train, we could dispatch local police to meet the train at a platform and board if necessary.
Have you heard of reports of security issues in the system?
Not too many. Occasionally I will hear an issue where we have a disgruntled customer or something along those lines, but it hasn't been anything major. But I can't say that it's never happened since I've been here. I can't think of one or two times that I've heard about that.
Okay. We have a
Usually
question.
a fare dispute or something like that, right? Somebody gets on the train, didn't pay, they get questioned about it, and turns into a argument.
Well, hopefully they're not beating up flight attendants because of mask mandates. We have a question here. Can you update on the status of the tanker storage in Sonoma? Why is freight one of the 4 priorities? The revenue potential near term seems secondary to the overall mission.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the tankers are on their way out. We took over on March 1st. We are working with those vendors that are currently that have been worked with in the past that store the LPG tanker cars there. And so we're working on dissolving those contracts, and we will be removing the tanker cars. The reason that freight is one of the strategic priorities is because it is on people's minds. It is a new venture. Is it the most important thing? That's debatable. But it is something that is a new venture for us, something that we need to be focused on, and we absolutely need to have a strategy as to, number one, how we're going to manage it and how we're going to grow it. Been very clear with the board, with getting rid of the LPG storage, which is a great thing for the Sonoma Valley. That did create a funding issue, right? So currently we're about $200,000 a year in the hole. And so we need to be paying attention to that and figure out how we can either gain more customers, or the other way, how do we reduce operating costs to be able to fill that gap? And so we definitely have to have a strategy to navigate our way through that process. So that's why it's one of our strategic objectives.
So that actually leads right into the next question from James Schmidt. It's not framed as a question, but I'll let you react to what he's stating here. Tracking SMART experience and results since the service began in 2017, the operating costs have never been below $60 per round trip passenger. Right now, it is above $140 per round trip. Just reading that in, I'll let you react to it.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. There's two levers that you pull when you look at subsidy per rider, right? One is ridership and the other one's operating cost. And in order to influence that number, you have to look at both. And right now, the easiest thing to do is focus on ridership. He is right, that number is high right now. And the reason is we didn't lay people off, right? We didn't lay people off through the pandemic. So you continue to have the expense. However, ridership, as you saw in the slides, plummeted. So that's the way that number is calculated, is expense divided by the number of passengers. And so that number is escalated quickly and is high. So really what we need to do is we need to be focused on filling up the train. And we need to have, 4,000 or 5,000 riders a day. And then we also need to look at our operating expenses and are there opportunities there to reduce some of those costs. Again, you have to look at that number from both directions. One, more riders, two, operating cost. And those are things that we are currently doing.
And Mr. Schmidt has a follow-up, couple secondary questions here. Can SMART really be a viable and a reasonable economic investment in light of these factors? And secondly, SMART has a 40% fare discount and a 60% service increase since June 2021. Now, inflation and high gas prices are affecting the system. How does SMART know the impacts of each?
That's a long question, a lot of information. Yes, as I said earlier, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think it could be a solution in the community. If I didn't think that that number could come down, I wouldn't be here. So I think the staff believes that we can accomplish this, and that's what I'm paid to do. And so that's what I'm focused on, is reducing that number and being a viable solution in the community. With fuel prices going up, I think that that's going to drive ridership. Mr. Schmidt pointed out that, services increased. And, in the transit business, if you run a very minimal service, you don't meet the needs of people, right? So if you're only running 5-6 trips a day, then you only meet those needs. And so it's a balancing act of providing service that actually meets people's needs that they can use versus not providing too much service. As we look out to the future, as people start to return from COVID, fuel prices are higher, assuming demand goes up, which I think it will. Do you need to look at adding more service? It's a question that you have to think about, because again, your service has to meet the needs of the community. It has to get people to where they want to go, when they want to go, or when they have to go. Same thing with the return trip. And so I think we need to think about all of these things. I hear a lot about Sunday service. Sunday service got cut out during COVID. However, I get a lot of emails and conversations about people saying, hey, this is when I ride the train. This is when I travel. This is when I go to grandma's house. When you giving me back my Sunday service? And so you have to manage all of these things. You can't just look at it from that one financial component. You also have to look at it from this is a service and it has to meet the needs of the community. So it's definitely not easy decisions.
Phyllis Metcalf has a question. Why did SMART decide to run freight service itself rather than contracting it out? It appears it would be more cost effective and a better choice to contract with those who have experience providing such a service.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been interesting to me that the public doesn't understand the freight experience that works in this organization. I haven't counted it up, but almost everybody in our operations department came from freight. Just on our leadership team, we have about 70 years of freight experience, just on the leadership team. There's a tremendous amount of freight experience here. I just recently hired a freight manager that will be taking over that. He was an internal employee. He was our transportation superintendent. I hired him to be the freight manager. There have been a lot of questions about why SMART chose to run it in-house. These decisions were made before I got here. As the board meeting before I got here is when that was finalized, I think, maybe 2 board meetings. But here we are. I think the agency is well qualified to run it. I think we will do a great job. I think we'll figure it out. I think it's, the difficult thing is we want to be able to control what's on that line, back to the LPG storage, right? It's very difficult to hire a contractor, say, hey, you're on your own, come in and do this. However, you can't do this, you can't do this, and you can't do this, right? Well, who's going to subsidize that, right? And so you have to think through all of these things, but I really want the public to understand we're not just I think we do a good job of providing commuter rail service and passenger rail service, but we absolutely do have a lot of freight experience in this organization.
Good to know. A few more questions here. Rick Lutman asks, Highway 37 is a commuter's nightmare, morning westbound and evenings eastbound. Moreover, it's subject to flooding, which will only get worse with sea level rise. SMART owns the track from Novato to Napa Junction. What are the possibilities for a SMART commuter service over this corridor?
I think it could happen. I mean, there have been studies on it. It's in the state rail plans looking at it. I mean, there's a real possibility there. The follow-up question that I get on this one was, well, what about funding, right? That's always the follow-up question when I get this question. And that's something that has to be looked at. I do think that there's a lot of work, there's a lot of studying that has to take place. I can't answer a lot of detailed questions. Do I think that the SMART train could be a viable solution for that community? Of course I do. Where would the stations be? What alignment would it take? How would it get? Those are all things that need to be studied and looked at. But there seems to be a lot of horsepower behind that. I get that question a lot. Of course, I think a train could be a solution through that area.
The Carneros line. We have a question here. How would you propose to connect to the Santa Rosa Airport? It seems like a good option regarding tourism.
I am working on that. That is one of my number one items. Obviously, we're working with our partners. I'm not prepared to make an announcement, but we are studying that. I will tell you what I want to see is I want to see some type of shuttle that connects straight to the train, straight to the airport, to and from. That's what I want to see. And, I'm going to work on that. We're actively working on that. We've been working on it probably the last 2 months. I agree with whoever it was that asked that question. That is absolutely a need, but I will go one step further. You have to solve that problem elsewhere too, right? So if somebody comes in at the airport and they're able to get this beautiful ride from the airport to the SMART station, and then they say they're going to Petaluma or Novato to stay in a hotel, how do they get from the station to their hotel? That's the next question. And so we've got to solve this first and last mile problem, not only at the airport and Larkspur. Those are really 2 areas that I'm really asking a lot of questions on right now, because I think those would potentially be good areas to do pilot projects on first and last mile solutions. So those are 2 areas that I'm looking at today. But I think long term, we have to have that solution at all of our stations.
We have a question here from Alan again. Is the gap between the Larkspur station and the ferry building an impediment to riders? And if so, how do you plan to address it?
I think so. And I tried to answer that in the my previous response, but I'm also looking at a first and last mile solution at Larkspur. Again, I think if you stand on the platform, you can see the ferry terminal, right? But it is quite a long walk. It's more than a quarter of a mile. Mm. And as I mentioned in the early beginnings, the average commuter will not walk more than a quarter of a mile, unless they absolutely have to. And so I do in the future want to see a connection that goes from the train station to the ferry, and not just there. People ought to be able to get to the hotels. They ought to be able to get to the restaurants. So I'm looking at something that can do multiple things in that area, not just straight to and from the terminal, because I think that there's more of a problem than just that.
You know, it occurs to me listening to you discuss this, that if you had this job 20 years ago, you'd have fewer things to consider as far as options in the private sector. You now have services such as Uber, Lyft, things of that sort, which I'm not necessarily a big fan of myself, but I know that they're out there and a lot of people use them. Of course, it adds cost both ways on using those kinds of services, but do they create more flexibility for riders that makes your job easier?
I think a lot of people use it. I think that for some that is, it's a barrier because of the cost, right? And then in the other side, I think a lot of people do utilize it for their first and last mile connections. You know, there's a product out there that I was familiar with in Utah. It's called microtransit, and essentially it's like almost like a public Uber. It uses technology to get people to and from where they want to go. So instead of having a bus that is on a fixed route that can only circulate a particular area and hit certain locations, it can essentially go anywhere. It's usually a smaller vehicle like a van or something like that. Is that a viable solution? It's something we need to think about and look at. But it is something that, I have talked to staff about as we look through what are our barriers here. I absolutely think that walk from this Larkspur station to the ferry is a barrier to riding. I think that is too long of a walk for some people, and it's one that I want to solve. Again, you can have all these great ideas, then you have to figure out how you're going to pay for it, right? And so we have to think through all of these things and figure out, what solutions we can actually afford to do and how they would meet the needs of the community.
One of our viewers asks, Marin Transit, which does the bus, I don't know what else they do. They have the same first/last mile issue as SMART does. Are you working with them for common solutions? And I would have to add, every transit system in the world has the same issue. There's no transit system anywhere that goes from your house to your office and back for every human being. So there's obviously limitations on any system. Marin may have greater problems than other areas because we're sort of semi-rural in many of our areas. And so service obviously has to be more spread out, but I'll let you take away that one.
Yes, I am working. I've met with Marin Transit. I've met with Santa Rosa City Bus. We're working with Sonoma County Bus. I haven't met directly with Petaluma Transit yet, but that's on my list of things to do. My staff obviously works with Petaluma Transit. My planner came from Petaluma Transit. So we have a lot of connections. Yes, we are working together. We're having these conversations. And you are correct, Scott. Anywhere you go in the country, first and last mile in transit is always a big conversation piece. And it's a problem that everybody's trying to solve. However, I think our problem, especially on the SMART side, is worse than most, to be honest with you. You look at where our stations are, and then you look where people actually want to go: employment centers, hotels, restaurants. It's eye-opening, and it's one that I really think that we've got to figure out how to solve. I have, Jim's asked several questions about the subsidy per rider. I've met with Jim personally, and I think the key is we've got to get more riders, but to get more riders, you've also got to make sure that it meets the needs of the community and meets the needs of the people of what they're trying to do.
Okay, and we have one more question here. There is a railroad museum with a steam train ready to run out of Shelville. Can they rent the tracks to create a new tourist experience in the wine country? If you're aware of that or not.
I am aware of that. Yes, we are in contact with the museum folks. They're the ones that own the train. I assume that's what they're talking about. And so, yeah, we've been in having those conversations, talking to folks. And so we'll continue to work through that as time goes on. But that has been presented to me, and conversations I look forward to having in the future.
A wine steam train rail experience. How about that? All right. Well, we have gone through our questions and our answers. I want to thank Eddy for being with us, giving us a tremendous presentation with a lot of information and being very patient with our many questions. Thank you for watching and for presenting your questions. I think it brought a lot of dynamism to the discussion today, and I'm really glad we had this Q&A. Our presentation will be recorded and will be available on the website. So you can go to marincoalition.org, go into the archives page, and you'll see that link to the recording. So you can send this to your friends if they weren't able to join us today, and they can watch the entire program. That will probably be up within 24 to 48 hours. Usually we get that up on the website pretty quickly. So thank you, Eddy, again. I really appreciate this, and maybe a year or two down the road, we can come back and do this again, get another update, and see where things are going. And in the meantime, we'll all look for those free passes and jump on the train. I got to come to your office and get one of those free passes. But we're looking forward to more from you, and thank you again for your time. Any last parting words?
Ride the train.
Okay, that wraps it up. Thanks everybody for watching. Again, our next program, don't forget, is April 12, Where the Money Goes, a breakdown of Measure A. That will be at noon on April 12. Go to the website to register or look for the email. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Eddy, and we'll all see you next time. Bye-bye.